Um, I'd like to welcome the Lady Mayoress tonight to our Talking Tuesdays. Um, she's perhaps better described in this context as being the city's queen bee. I have to say I was disappointed you're not wearing your bee equipment, but I guess they've all gone back inside. Having had a warm welcome a week ago, I think they now had a very cold shock. I'm not sure, it hasn't been snowing in Cambridgeshire, but we no doubt find out about that, which is where Hilary and her husband live, and I think are currently residing. She is also a liveryman, I think, of one of our neighbours, of the farmers, who I think, if I'm not mistaken, have their hall around the corner from us. So another Smithfield dweller. She has lots of charitable interests, and of course is very busy as the Lady Mayoress. And I think on that note, rather than spend more time talking about all your background, it's better we hand over to you and hear about this really interesting subject. So Hilary, over to you.
Thank you, Master, very much. Good evening, everyone. Before I go anywhere, I would like to explain that I'm very much an amateur beekeeper. And rather amusingly, I did a little talk to another livery company not that long ago, and at the end of it, there's me, spouting off about bees and beekeeping and biodiversity. And at the end, somebody revealed themselves as a beekeeper, and I said, "Oh, really? So how many beehives do you have?" Thinking maybe one or two, a bit like me, but no, this person had 100 beehives, and they've been keeping bees for 30 years. So at this point I felt very humble and rather embarrassed that I had been talking about beekeeping. So forgive me if there's some professional beekeepers on this call, but I'll state right now I am an amateur. Anyway, I'm delighted to join you for one of your social evenings, which I think are an excellent idea. But it's particularly good to join the information technologists, given that when I was sheriff's consort, we to one of your past masters, Lady Palmley, when she was Lady Mayoress, we had a lovely time with you, and we actually came to your 25th anniversary in the Guild Hall. And I remember because it was the 4th of May, which was lovely, wonderful Wendy's birthday. So it was an extra special occasion at the Guild Hall. So thank you very much for asking me to come tonight to talk to you about my interest in bees, the beehives on Mansion House roof, and how bees are playing their part in our mayoral year, or years, I think I should say now. Being Queen Bee, I like nothing better than being centre stage while my busy workers get on with their work. So thank you for asking me to join you all tonight. So my early interest in bees came as a result of studying entomology at Durham University, and also through living in the country, where we in Cambridgeshire, as the master said, where we have a garden full of flowers and plants which are always alive with buzzing insect life. So I took myself on a beekeeping course with the Cambridgeshire Beekeepers Association, and if any of you want to set up as a beekeeper, that is what the sensible way forward is, to go and learn all about it. Beekeepers are very friendly people and very accommodating. So I went on this course, and then I set myself up as a beekeeper. Most potential beekeepers are naturally concerned about being stung by bees, but to date I have actually only been stung 3 times, so I consider myself to be very lucky. And as for honeybees, an interesting fact for you, there are over 20,000 species of bee worldwide, but only 7 of those are honeybees. But they are absolutely everywhere, honeybees. And I'm sure you've all noticed the bees are out there, they're out and about right now collecting nectar and pollen. In fact, I just added this in, that is in our greenhouse here. It's a apricot tree, that is an apricot tree. And it was covered in bumblebees just last week. It's now forming fruit. But there was a little bumblebee, not a honeybee, but a bumblebee, doing its pollinating work there. So back to my journey with the bees. In 2018, we were planning for our first year in Mansion House. And as Lady Palmley knows, one of the lovely tasks to prepare is to come up with ideas for gifts that the Lord Mayor and Lady Mayoress might give out during the year. So being alert, sorry about this, this was my opportunity to include bees in the year. So in April 2019, I asked the Estlins, Peter and Lindy, if they would mind us putting beehives up on the roof at Mansion House, so that by the time we hopefully took up residence in November 2019, we would have the first honey harvest and thus could use the Lord Mayor's honey made by the Lady Mayoress's bees as one of the gifts. Now I need to mention our wonderful beekeeper, Mark Patterson, he's called, and I met him on the roof at Namura, which is actually where this photograph was taken. And I visited the garden and beehives up there, and Namura have been doing this really well and looking after the biodiversity. Actually, there's a green roof behind in that picture. It doesn't look very green, but it is, they have planters up there now and they do a lot for biodiversity in the city. Anyway, Mark agreed to become the beekeeper of the Mansion House, a new official role. So why, you ask yourself, am I not the official beekeeper if I am fully trained? Well, it's actually all about being available in the very busy swarming months. The bee swarming is April through to September. And it's swarming season. You have to be available and you have to check on your beehives very regularly, particularly in the city, to prevent them swarming. And in my role as Lady Mayoress, I recognised very early on that I wouldn't have the time to do it. And to be honest, I had no idea what I would do if these bees did swarm and ended up at landed themselves on the top of a huge sort of buzzing mass on the top of a lamppost on Cheapside. It wasn't going to be very easy. So hence Mark's involvement. So here we are. Mark moved 2 of his beehives onto the roof at Mansion House. They have a pretty good view, I reckon. And so I took up Lady Lindy Estlin and for the grand opening of the hives. And of course we had bee suits on, so you can't really tell who's who. But we're all safely hidden under those suits. Now, the beehives have been designed, this was a lovely job, and we designed them with a friend of Mark's to look like mini mansion houses. And as you can see, they've got a little portico on the front and the bees fly in and out of the portico. You can sort of see a couple of bees there. And they've got these lovely, beautiful green copper roofs and a lantern on the top that's similar to lanterns you do find on the Mansion House. And the detailing is very good. I mean, not that we're competitive, of course, but they do line up rather well next to Fortnum and Mason's beehives, not to mention Prince Charles's hives. So now bees need plenty of flowers and plants on which to forage for as long a period as possible. And I realized that here was my next opportunity to help the bees and the pollinators in the city. For a while, it had been concerning me that the stone window boxes on the front of Mansion House were filled with artificial box hedging, which very smart, low maintenance, but no good for bees and pollinators. So quite a few emails later and meetings, aided by Mark, we had permission to remove this box and plant up bee-friendly window boxes. Now, let's find them. There we are. Here you can see the flowering window boxes last year. Gosh, that's last year. That's quite a thought. Probably a bit like that right now. And the flowers over the year will include geranium roseanne, muscari bulbs, hyacinths, wheatshire, lavender, gora, that's the lovely whirling butterflies, dianthus, stachys, thrift, snow in summer, Mexican fleabane, snapdragon, all those lovely pollinator-friendly plants. It's important to note here that pollinator-friendly planting doesn't always look tidy. In fact, it's often quite scruffy, but hopefully people are now realizing that this is positive for biodiversity and the environment, and it's a small price to pay to have a slightly scruffy window box and not have a sort of beautiful, pristine display all year round. So last year, Mark took 35 pounds of honey from our rooftop hives, those 2 hives, and he bottled that up to use as gifts. It's gone down very well, as far as I can gather. And important to note that when you take the honey off the hives, you must leave enough honey to keep the bees going through winter. And usually you leave around 30 pounds of honey per hive. Now, we're back up on the roof here, and you can see the Lord Mayor, complete with his badge even, rather. I wear the brooch, he has the badge. And we got him up in his peppermint green suit. I'm not sure he was entirely amused by that. But he's posing by the hives. And then this was in late July. And there he is, down in the Mansion House kitchens, deserted, helping to spin the honey. I couldn't let my top drone get away without helping out at harvest time. And then, if this works, he even tasted. Well, you can see him sticking his finger in there.
That is absolutely delicious. Best honey I've ever tasted.
Now then, we come to the next little project in my journey, which was to design the label and the packaging for this honey. It's all very well having honey, but we had to have it all perfectly, all safely, healthily packaged. So first of all, I sought out these beautiful labels using Tregothnan Estate in Cornwall. They were the designers, and in fact, they also helped with the tea caddy and produced the Lord Mayor's own blend of tea for the year, which was peppermint tea. It's gone down very well. And then I had to fix the problem of finding someone to make these little boxes. I've got one here actually, but make the little box in which the jar fits into beautifully. And so for this, so we were going back to the Old Bailey days when we lived in the Old Bailey for a year. When my husband was sheriff, I became interested in prisoner rehabilitation. And I learned a lot about many excellent charities and the work that goes on in this sector. And having visited a few prisons and seen some of these projects, I thought it must be possible to find a carpentry department to help with the mini beehives. Ley Hill Prison in Gloucestershire came to the rescue. Ley Hill is an open prison for 500 men, 3/5 of whom are lifers at the end of their sentences. The average stay is 6 to 18 months. And they have this fantastic carpentry department and actually a print department as well. So I sent them the little box that I had found, and they brilliantly produced these beautiful little boxes. And then I found the little bee on the front through Thorns, who are one of the big beekeeping supplies manufacturers. And so they managed to make these. I wasn't allowed to take my camera into the prison, but I did actually, just to prove that I did go all the way down. Took me a day to get there and back. Anyway, came back with all these beautiful boxes, and I do have one here. There we go, just to prove they are real, they're in existence. And I'll be organising for a pot of honey in one of these little boxes to come round to you, Master, and hopefully a little spoon of some sort for your lovely clerk, the customary Mansion House spoon. I've always wanted to say that. So on we go. Right, the next little part of my story. Now, we have to be very careful with the honeybees at the moment and with the honey, because the square mile obviously looks and feels very different. And maybe it smells different too. You may have heard that a huge cannabis farm was discovered underneath Throgmorton Street. This was actually underneath the property of another livery company. I couldn't possibly say which one, but it rhymes with vapors. Being on top of Mansion House roof, we think our honeybees are high enough already, but we want them to be happy. And while we want them to be happy, we hope they haven't been affected, though it could give the honey an interesting flavour. But enough of that. I won't rehash the same old jokes. Had to happen, I'm sorry. Now then, another aspect of my work with bees is the charitable side. For the past 6 years, I've been an ambassador for a wonderful charity called Bees for Development. And this charity works to alleviate poverty in the developing world through sustainable beekeeping. This is us, sorry, not us, it's not me. This is the charity working out in Ghana. They're making beehives out of local products. It's all that's why it is all very sustainable. Nobody's encouraging them to use European beehives. It's all very much working with what they have and making it work for them. And an example here I just popped in is you can see the result of the nut yield, cashew nut yield in the orchards in Ghana. The blue is with bees and the brown is without. It's staggering. So everybody's a winner there because the farmer gets a larger harvest, and the local people, the beekeepers, can make some money from the honey and the wax, and people are healthier as well. So it's a great little charity. Those are cashew nuts. Thought I'd put them in there. It's rather beautiful, but I always wondered what a cashew nut looked like. But there we go. So and so every other year I help this charity with the Bee Garden Party, which is hosted by Martha Carney and actually Bill Turnbull, but it started off as Martha Carney's tea party at Lambeth Palace, the first one. And, you know, as Lady Mayoress, I am in the position, it's a lovely position to be able to help the causes close to my heart. And this is one that I particularly enjoy being involved with. So actually, I thought, what better than a bee banquet at the Mansion House? Well, it was due to take place last May, but I'm afraid, as with all these other events, physical fundraising, we had to cancel it. There is talk of another bee banquet or a bee dinner or something later on this year, but we'll see. Everything's still in planning stages. But instead, we did actually hold a bee sundowner with Bill Turnbull and Martha Carney and Monty Don, which proved to be a huge success, as well as raising money for Bees for Development. And I was able to make a donation to the Lord Mayor's appeal. So again, everyone was happy with that one. This actually is the picture at the Bee Garden Party in Marlborough, the Gardens of Marlborough House on Piccadilly, just to prove if you ever come along, you're encouraged to wear something floral. So we took that one to the extreme. It was great fun. Now then, Pollinating London Together. So just before I finished, I told you it wasn't a very long talk. I just wanted to touch on a project here in the city, or there in the city, that I'm supporting. It's Pollinating London Together. And I know the project is familiar to many of you, and indeed your very own Steve Smith. I don't know if Steve's on this call, but Steve is leading the media group for this initiative, which is absolutely fantastic. And not only this, but I know you've also been very, very supportive and helped with the website that you've very generously sort of helped work up, and it's now a really impressive website. So thank you for that. But for anybody who doesn't know, Pollinating London Together is an association of the London Livery Companies and the Bumblebee Conservation Trust. I think they're going to be less involved, but to date they have been very much a partner. These livery companies and the trust have been looking at ways, together with London corporate, civic and charitable organisations, plus city workers and residents, to continue to improve the London environment. The vision of Pollinating London Together is a London clothed in green, pollinator-friendly planting that provides a naturally healthier environment for pollinators and for humans in body and mind. So together with the Gardeners Livery Company and the Bumblebee Conservation Trust, Pollinating London Together, they've done several pollinator audits in city gardens. They did last year. When they started. So the aim is to see if we can get all livery companies with gardens to participate, as well as the city gardens and open spaces teams. Last year we had 6 livery companies who were happy with garden audits. You could probably guess most of them. Barber, the surgeons, stationers, goldsmiths, drapers, the plasterers and the salters. And this year, the team hopes to they will redo those gardens, and then they hope to add in, they've potentially got 6 more, and the gardens of St. Paul's and possibly the Tower of London. That's slightly out of the city, but it's still, as far as insects are concerned, still in the region. So it's a great project, and do look it up on the wonderful new website. Now, that's my last slide. So it's funny how word travels. And I have to say that bees and honey have cropped up a lot, so often during the year, and continue to do in this year too. And we've been given jars. We got so much honey; it's absolutely marvelous. But we've been given jars of honey from Rwanda, Canada, the USA. We got honey, delicious honey from the bees at Winfield House, the American ambassador's residence in Regent's Park. We've got honey from the roof of Namura, from Epping Forest, Hampstead Heath, and most recently the honey from West Ham Park in Newham, which I visited during lockdown. So West Ham Park is a wonderful open space, owned and run. It's very large, owned and run by the corporation. It's in Newham, as I said, and it's 77 acres of gardens, trees, playgrounds, wildflower areas, sports facilities, and even a bandstand. With the help of their brilliant volunteers, West Ham Park, they were the only green space in Newham to open every single day of lockdown number 1, open for the use of residents, which is pretty impressive. I'm sure they've been doing so since then as well, but certainly that first lockdown when everything seemed pretty bleak. Last year I was also given the opportunity to open the National Honey Show, which has been going for almost 100 years. I was actually going there originally to be there at the Honey Show, but sadly I had to do that online as well. And the Honey Show is also supported by the Wax Chandlers due to their use of beeswax. So I'm pleased to say that there are strong city connections to bees and honey, which is, as many of you, as you will know, also happens to be Cockney rhyming slang for honey, perhaps reflecting the idea of working hard to get a sweet reward at the end. Now, I'm very happy to take questions, as long as there are no professional beekeepers out there, please.
How many beehives are there in the city?
Well, no, I don't know that. Don't know the answer to that, because actually nobody does. Because according to my beekeeper, there's 1 or 2 that aren't registered, and they should all be registered with the London Beekeepers Association. If you've got a hive, you register it. But there's certainly some around the Holborn Viaduct area that nobody quite knows where they are. And they're in a little bit of a worry because they keep swarming. Every year, my poor beekeeper gets called in because he's the local swarm collector, and he has to make his way to Holborn Viaduct. And he gets a bit upset because he has to take all his kit in, which means he has to have his vehicle, which means he has to pay congestion charge and parking. And he has to remove this swarm every year, and he doesn't get any reward for it. So there definitely are enough. Because in fact, Fortnum and Mason from the Royal Exchange when they moved there, they were hoping to bring beehives over to the Royal Exchange roof. And the London Beekeepers Association said, you know, we have got enough beehives in the city. What we need more of is foraging material. And when we started our year, my husband was so excited about the whole bee thing, and he kept saying to everybody he met, the Lady Mayoress says you should have bees, you must get bees. Have you got a roof? Yes, bees on your roof. And I'm going, no, wrong message. You need to encourage people to plant green roofs and planters and get the forage up, not more bees, please. So there are plenty of bees, but I couldn't tell you how many. As you know, we have 2. There's certainly there's bees on the roof of the London Stock Exchange, and obviously Namura have bees, and there's some bees a few bees around the sort of Law Courts area as well, and there's some.
Sorry, do they still have bees on Lloyd's as well? Because they used to. They were looked after by Canopius.
Did they? Okay. No, I don't think they do. Nobody's mentioned those to me. I don't think so.
They used to, but I don't.
There's a company called Bermondsey. Is it called Bermondsey Honey or Bermondsey Bees? And he's just over the river. He looks after quite a few of this, and in fact, he's got a honey called Mansion House honey. And I think that's because he thinks his bees fly to the Mansion House area, and so he was rather clever and grabbed the name and called it Mansion House honey. And we couldn't have Mansion House honey; we had to call it the Lord Mayor's honey. But he didn't. He was quite happy about that. Are there any beekeepers on the call on the Zoom?
No, I do have a question though, Lady Mayoress.
Hello, nice to meet you.
what do they do with the swarms they collect? So your beekeeper collects all these swarms. Where do they go? What do they do with them?
Yes, good question. Well, they take them back to their home patch where they usually have got some spare beehives, and you literally tip them in. And as long as you've got the queen there, the rest will stay. And you shut them up for a night so that they learn this is their new home, and then they can open up and establish themselves in that area. But I mean, I've got a Polish beekeeper who helps me back here in Cambridgeshire, because as well as being not able to look after the bees in London because of the whole programme as Lady Mayoress and Lord Mayor, I can't look after the bees here because I was more often in London than I was here. And when I am here, we've got 24 hours to sort of turn around and get out. So I have a Polish beekeeper here, and I'm looking across my field at the moment. He's got about 30 beehives there, and it is his business. So he collects swarms and then he sells them on. But he makes sure that they are healthy swarms with a queen and some healthy brood, and the right proportion of the different types of bees that you would need to start your own colony. And it's called a nuke, as in a nucleus, and you would buy a nuke if you're a new beekeeper. Or in fact, one of my colonies here didn't make it through the winter, so I'm getting a new one from him the minute you've got a swarm. I mean, you can split a colony, and they'll make a new queen. So I'm about to have a new queen and worker bees in one of my beehives here. So it'll take them time to build up, but there are people who make a living out of it. Yeah.
Hilary, there has been some questions in the chat facility. Kerry has asked, can we buy Mansion House honey?
There isn't really enough of it to put it on sale. I occasionally put it in. I usually put some honey and something like a tour of the beehives and the Mansion House, and then I usually give some honey when we do that tour. So no, I'm afraid it's not possible to buy it. You have to talk to the master, see if you can go and have toast and honey with him when he's got his pot.
On the other hand, we might put in our charity sale at Christmas.
Yeah, well, there you are, highly sought after.
Yeah, exactly. So you might fetch a lot of money if you want honey.
Yes, we could do a deal.
Sorry?
I'm sure we could do a deal, since you've been so generous to Pollinating London together. I'd be happy to donate a pot to your charity, your Christmas sale.
I must say it's absolutely delicious.
Oh, yes, hello.
Hello. Thank you very much indeed, Lady Mayoress. Most interesting. And it's great to hear the background about the beehives on the roof at Mansion House. And I must say that the honey is delicious. Yes. And also the beautiful design of the box that the honey came in or comes in. And I hope that the bees will have been as happy this summer as they were previously. And my question really is, do you think the bees will be scared off when people come back into the city, hopefully as of next week?
Well, golly, I hadn't really thought about that. But it's been so lovely and quiet for them with no traffic and people. I don't think so. I think they really have such a strong mission in life to be out there collecting pollen and nectar, and as they do that, they then pollinate. That I just think that's such a strong urge and a need that they'll be fine. They'll just carry on. In fact, with any luck, because there hasn't been so much pollution, I guess maybe all the plantings will be sort of full of really beautiful flowers and plants, and actually more people are really getting it and planting for, not just planting to look pretty, as I said earlier, but really planting, even around St. Paul's. I've been working on the open spaces team, because begonias look beautiful, but they're no good for honeybees, and they're not very good for pollinators generally. So there's a special word for them. They're sort of sterile, I think. So they're just grown to look pretty. So there definitely is more awareness and some better planting now for them. But it's interesting what you say about the flavour of the honey, because we've had a little bit of a taste off between honey here and honey from London, and actually the London honey is, we think, tastier, because it has, well, I think it's because it has such a variety of flowers and plants for the bees to forage on, whereas out here, and you often find it in the countryside, you've got monocultures. We've got a rape field just beyond, and they're only going to fly as far as they have to. They're not going to fly, make themselves fly any further to get the different pollens, so and nectar. So it's actually, it is tasty. Funny enough, my daughter, who you know, Wendy, was here earlier and with a friend, and she was saying, they said, what's she doing? I was talking about bees and honey, and her friend Georgie said, did you know that if you take a spoonful of honey every day, it can really help with your hay fever? And I said, well, yeah, people do say that. Absolutely. It's got to be the local honey to where you're living. And she said she used to have really bad hay fever. And last year she took a spoonful of honey every day and she completely cleared up her hay fever. I mean, there's possibly stories where people have tried that and it hasn't worked, but for her, it did. So if anybody's got hay fever, get to your local honey source and start taking it on a daily basis.
As a sign of pollution last year, was your honey production greater than the year before?
It was it had built up actually, because our colony had got stronger and had really settled in. So it's, you know, the bees are really good at cleaning the honey. So, you know, people worry about it being that city honey will have, you know, more pollutants in it, but I guess you could say they would have pollutants from the chemicals used, pesticides used in the crops, but actually it's a minute amount that ends up in the honey. I mean, you know, traces of it literally, which is really encouraging. They're very clever bees. Yes, they are endless. They endlessly fascinate me. There's so much to learn about them.
So David's asked, will the beehives stay on the roof for future Lady Mayoresses after you and William have left?
Well, I'm really hoping so, yes, because I think, well, certainly if all things going according to plan, the Keaveneys are keen to continue with them. And I think it's a great example. As I said, you know, fortunately, we can also claim that we've got the planters now with, you know, correct foraging material for the bees and pollinators, and we've put planters on the roof, so they've got more up there. So I mean, I would hope so. I don't see why not, and it's a lovely thing to have. You know, we have it for breakfast, and you know, when there are sort of a formal breakfast, we serve our own honey, and we've been using it in quite a lot of the recipes whenever we can. And so, yeah, I really hope they will continue with it. In fact, that reminds me, I must get on. Time is ticking away, and I must, not now, but during the next few weeks, talk and make sure that there is a sort of plan for them, because there used to be bees about 10 years ago, and there were volunteers looking after them, and then the volunteers drifted away, and the bees didn't survive. So I do need to make sure my lovely bees, and if not, but I mean, Mark will carry on looking after them. It's just a case of who sort of coordinates it and funds it. What else is there? Do we know how far the bees the range? Well, they will go up to a range of about 3 kilometers. If they have to, as I said when I was talking about the rape fields here, they would prefer not to have to go far, because they're using up energy all the time. So they would prefer that they can get it locally, as near to their hive as possible, and also you have to make sure there's some water around as well. They always need water. And you know, it's interesting because they do seem to be fine on top of buildings, but I think some work was done, and they looked at how high, what the sort of best height would be to keep bees on a roof, or how high could they go, and actually 11th floor tended to be that about the maximum, because depending on how much there is for them to forage on up high, if they're having to fly up and down all the time, it sort of defeats the object if they've got to go more than 11 floors. So you know, they won't go as far, you know, they don't have to, they won't go further, but they can go up to 3 kilometers. Oh, I like that. Have the flowers that influence the taste of the Lord Mayor's honey? Well, I like to think so. I'm sure they have. They also, I think there's a little limey flavour in there. There's some lime trees. They like lime tree pollen. But yes, possibly. I mean, you can send your honey off to a laboratory and they can tell you exactly what's contributed to the honey, and give you a list of the plants and flowers, plants that your bees will have been foraging on, which is quite interesting. And what can we do to help bee planting? Well, gardens. Have you got? Do you have flower boxes? Do you have window boxes on your hall? Can't remember.
Not at the moment. I think it's something we're considering.
Ah, very good. Well, I mean, they have if you go onto the RHS website, they have a list of pollinator-friendly plantings, but also Pollinating London together has got that sort of information as well. So there's always somebody to give you help you with information on that. And of course, you must use peat-free compost. That's a very important element of it as well. But yeah, so that and roof planting and planting at home. I mean, Monty Don's talking about not, I don't know if anybody's seen him recently, he's talking about not mowing in May, isn't he? Not meant to mow your lawns in May, so that there's more for pollinators and wildflowers, obviously. But we're happy to leave part of our garden, but I don't think my husband quite likes stripes on his lawn. So he's not very keen on the leave. He says there's plenty out there in the field. But yeah, that's another way you can help the bees. What else is that? When looking for bees to stop, it's an official body organism we recommend to contact. Well, I would always go for your local beekeeping association. I mean, even this week I get a newsletter, and there's been you get information about who would like a hive in their garden, because sometimes people are saying, well, look, I've got a beautiful garden and lovely orchard, but I'm not a beekeeper, but I'd love some bees in here. And you can, through your local beekeepers association, you'd be able to be linked up to somebody who had some bees and would like to put them, and you do a deal. You say a certain number of jars of honey for the use of my orchard. And the other way around, you can also, if you wanted to keep bees, you could be linked up the other way around. So yeah, definitely go to your local beekeepers association. Mine's the Cambridgeshire Beekeepers Association. I know of the Kent Beekeepers Association. They're very busy, as you can imagine, and lots of talks, endless information and kind people. And usually if you do a course like I did, they'll buddy you up with somebody so that you're not left. It's quite a lot to remember. And you've got a smoker and you're looking for swarms, and it can all get a bit sticky, and you've got propolis all over your gloves, and then you get stung, and the whole thing can be quite stressful, and the bees like you to be nice and calm. So it's a buddy. If you're going to go down the route of becoming a beekeeper, go to your local beekeepers association, do the course. It's really, I think it was 8 weeks in the evening, once a week, and then a bit of online stuff and a couple of practicals, and off you go. It's very rewarding, very rewarding.
I think Wayne Smith had a question. Wayne, did you want to take yourself off mute?
Yes, thank you very much, Melissa. Thank you, Lady Mayoress. That was fascinating. Myself and my wife were thinking about beehives and beekeeping a couple of years ago, but there was a lot of talk of the Varroa Mite at the time. Is that still an issue, or has that gone away now?
No, you're absolutely right, Wayne. It is still an issue, and people treat for the Varroa Mite now. And the beekeeping associations will encourage everybody to treat every hive every year to try and keep on top of the population. And you treat the hive after you've taken the honey off in the summer, so before you sort of put them to bed, so maybe late September, October. But it's interesting, there are different theories on this, because my Polish beekeeper friend here, he comes from a long line of Polish beekeepers, and they very much believe in breeding traits in or out. So he will not treat for the Varroa Mite. If his colony doesn't survive through the Varroa Mite, then through natural selection, that's how it is. So any colony that he has that it seems to be holding out against the mite, this is his theory, is, you know, natural selection means that he wants to keep those bees. So he'll then split that colony and he'll breed from that. He'll breed queens from that genetic group. But really, the majority of people, and we certainly treat in London, treat for that mite. But it's you know, it's treatable, and it's safe to eat the honey. So don't let it put you off. It's definitely worth definitely worth. I mean, they're doing a lot of work into it, and there's 2 or 3 different ways of treating the mite now. So yeah, poor bees though, it's not very nice. You can see it on their abdomen, little white mite, not very nice. But yeah, and it can destroy colonies, sadly.
That's great, thank you very much.
Whereabouts do you live?
We're in Lichfield in Staffordshire.
Oh, beautiful. So you've probably got a local Staffordshire Beekeepers Association. Did you look into it?
We did, yes.
Yes.
We've looked at Shropshire as well because we were over that way doing our investigation. So yes, maybe one day. Like you say, it's the commitment during the summer months.
Yes, yeah, I know, really. But I mean, if you're lucky enough to have a local friend who buddy who would like to buddy up with you or keep a beehive in your garden and look after yours when you go away and vice versa, then that's quite a good arrangement. It seems to be people out there who want to team up, and so it's, and you know, people in cities that don't really want to keep them in the city but would like to have a beehive. So it's worth looking into. I think that Sir Andrew Palmley's considering it up in Blackpool in his garden up there.
Yes, he's already got the Lancashire Beekeepers Association involved.
Oh, great.
What they'll do is they'll come in every 2 weeks and tend to the hives. So we're going to be meeting them in August, I think it is.
Terrific.
Yes, it's all happening. But it's so cold up here. I'm astonished that bees can survive.
Yes, because bees actually like a temperature of about 8 degrees before they'll be out flying. And so, yeah, that's why, you know, I keep a good eye on when I walk past them every day to see what they're up to. And they really don't come out. They won't. But that's why they hibernate and they go quiet over the winter months and then get incredibly busy when they can. And I love seeing them on the snowdrops and the hellebores in the early little spring. Occasionally on a sort of lovely warm March day, you might see them out and about. But right now in the cherry blossom, if I stand underneath one of our trees, the cherry tree in the garden, you just hear this sort of canopy of buzzing going on. It's wonderful. And they're really, really busy on a lovely day. Yeah. Oh, that's good, Wendy. You'll be able to get your honey, your own local honey.
Yes. It might be flavoured rock or
yes.
sea salt or something like that. You never know.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
We're trying to grow a meadow so that we'll have all the right flowers and so on. But unfortunately, the land's quite rich. So the meadow flowers are finding it difficult to take root. We'll find a way around it.
Yes, they say you're meant to plant yellow rattle, aren't you? Did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Yellow rattle, and you buy it as little plugs and you plant it because it will outcompete grass, because the grass on good soil, as you say, will grow and your little wildflowers won't be able to grow. So if you have quite a lot of yellow rattle, which is itself a wildflower, its root system apparently suppresses grass, and then you'll have more luck. I'm trying to do the same actually here, but it's not just a case of throwing a nice packet of wildflower seeds out and off you go. Sadly, it's a bit more than that. Yeah, you're right. You need a barren bit of land.
Yeah, that's good.
I think Suzanne had a question. Suzanne, would you like to unmute yourself?
Yes, thank you, Lady Mayoress. It's so wonderful to hear about supporting local honey production and local food production. And I live in Surbiton, so I have a little story and then a question. I live in Surbiton, and in our local farmers market, there's an incredibly charming stall of bee cream, so bees or creams made from honey. and as well as various local honeys from directly in this area. So they've got Hampton Court honey, honey, and Pat's local honey, and I think it's the Kingston Beekeepers Association. They speak so passionately about how this one feeds on lime trees and this one goes up and down the train tracks and feeds on brambles, and it's so charming.
That's lovely.
And I was inspired. So there's a story in the news that you may have heard over maybe the last year, but there was a beekeeper in Turkey who had problems with bears attacking his hives and kept stealing the honey. So he set up a taste test. He put different pots of honey and then allowed the bears to choose their honey. And every time it picked the most expensive honey, which was their honey.
Really?
Every time it had a video camera. It's very sweet if you
That's
Google
a great story. Yeah.
But my question is about the Pollinating London Together. Are there schools involved in, does it involve school children? Because getting school children involved in food production. Really.
Absolutely. No, you're exactly. So it's all about education. Yes, they are involving schools. There's a whole sort of science side of it. You can actually, anybody can volunteer to get involved in the project, but they are part of the work is to take the project into schools, and of course through the livery companies there are lots of school connections, and so that is definitely like there are about 4 or 5 different sort of work streams, and one of which is education, and not just schools but people generally. But you're absolutely right. It's so important to educate children. And actually there I think it would have been in our Shrewsbury year, we went to the school that's it was called the John Cass School primary school, but it's probably got a different name now. But on their roof they are so pleased. They had little vegetable boxes, and they had a couple of beehives, and the children loved it, and they would come up with their little mini bee suits, and they really fascinating. And the teacher would say some of the most challenging children would be unbelievably well behaved if they were, well, I think they probably didn't want to get stung, but you know, they would really respond to the whole story of the bees and the beekeeping. And in fact, my daughter, when she sort of saw what was going on with our bees and thought it was so interesting, she went to her school and asked them if they would start a beekeeping club up. So they did. And she found one of the teachers who was a beekeeper, who was keen to share his knowledge, and they all became little beekeepers. And I just said to Steph, I've just finished her pot of honey from her school that she gave me last year. So, you know, it's good, and it's definitely right up there on the Pollinating London agenda, Pollinating London Together. Yeah. I love your story about the bees. That's great. It's a lovely film if you want to watch a beautiful, very mindful film. I think it's called Honeyland. And it's about beekeeping in Macedonia. It's absolutely beautiful. It's slow, beautiful, and very moving. Actually, it's really lovely. So if you've got an hour and a half, it's a true story. It's just charming. It's lovely.
Thank you.
Nice to meet you. Great. Time for honey and tea.
I was just going to ask you: is beekeeping on the increase?
I think it is, because there was all these celebrity beekeepers, so people like Martha Carney, actually, and who was the latest one? Was it Jude Law or somebody? I mean, David Beckham's just become a beekeeper, hasn't he? So yeah, there was a bit of a sort of rush for beekeeping, and a lot of them didn't really know what they were doing, so consequently there were a lot of unwanted swarms all over the place. But I think, yeah, it definitely became quite fashionable, and I think, you know, everybody's really wanting to do something for the environment and for the plight of the bee. And so, yeah, definitely, it's always been seen as being an older person's hobby, I think. Whereas we don't really talk about hobbies anymore, really, do we? We always was when we were little, everybody used to ask what your hobby was. But I think more young people are into it. It's become quite cool. There's quite a sort of like the whole foraging world, and all the guys on Instagram and the bloggers, they all seem to have bees now. And I think it helps the Prince of Wales the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall. Of course, they're very competitive over their bees. Over their honey. They apparently really do compete on the flavour of their honey and the quantity they produce. In fact, the Duchess of Cornwall, she's just become the patron of Bees for Development, which is a really wonderful thing for the charity. And what she said is that all the honey that she produced on her estate would be sold at Fortnum & Mason's, and the proceeds would all go to the charity. So we need Fortnum & Mason's to open up and sell that honey. But yeah, I do think it's definitely on the up.
So anybody else got a question? On that note, I think so thank you for your time and wonderful talk and information. And I just think it's wonderful this is going on in the city. My office, or my erstwhile office, and I go there reasonably regularly, actually overlooks whatever it's now called, but the Sir John Cass Primary School at the bottom of Aldgate. So next time I go, I shall look down to see what's going on the roof. So that's really interesting. Thank you very much for the pot of honey. I was going, even before I knew you were going to give this to me, I was going to reciprocate to you by offering you a pot of homegrown and homemade marmalade.
Oh, wow.
Oranges in our house in Nice, in France.
Oh, my goodness. How gorgeous.
It doesn't come in quite such a smart pot, but it is a recycled Bon Maman.
Oh, very nice.
with an IT label made by me. I'll bring you that in exchange. So we'll have to meet for an exchange.
Yes, absolutely. Oh, that's very, very kind of you. Thank you. We really, it's our weekend treat, marmalade, and I don't make marmalade. I can get sticky with honey, but not sticky with marmalade. So thank you very, very much indeed. I've really enjoyed.
On that note, thank you very much, and we'll all put our hands together or wave in order to show appreciation. And thank you for a wonderful evening.
Lovely, thank you.